Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Jodo Cast, your Star Wars gaming podcast. This is episode 63. I'm not dead, and I'm still Evan Lewis, and we have to give a big thank you to, I'm going to flip it around this time, Joe Latovsky for leading the crew last time. Joe Latovsky,
just doing
anytime.
my job.
Boom, there he is.
Two-man crew.
And that's Leo Andry. Any day now.
What?
It might be a lot.
I had already talked. I mean...
Oh my goodness, you have to say hello, everybody.
Well, I kind of did, sort of.
Oh my goodness. You just weren't feeling it? It wasn't in the moment?
Yeah.
It was like on Roger Rabbit. You could only do it when it was funny, that kind of thing? All right. Well, I'll let you go with that. I'll let you off with a warning this time. So... let's see here. Do we have any new patrons? I've been out of the loop for a while, so I will defer a lot of this to the people who were actually here doing their jobs.
Well, you were doing your job, just a different job.
I guess. Arguably, this is the more important job.
But I don't think we got any new ones.
There's a total of 0 new patrons.
All right. Well, that's fair enough. But we still have to give huge thank yous to all of the previous and currently existing patrons. They are the greatest people in the known universe. So thank you all for helping us keep the show going. It's always appreciated. And we look forward to your friends that you tell all about the show coming and joining the team also. That would be pretty cool.
Heavy hands there. We will hold you personally responsible for the current lack of an influx of new patrons. It's definitely not our fault for not being more entertaining or something like that.
Of course not.
We're past that point.
All right, well, let's move on past that point and talk about what we've been playing. And I'm not going to have a lot, so let's start with Joe.
I feel like there's been a lot since the last time we did a What We've Been Playing segment, because we didn't do it last time, but I guess recently I played Destiny on like Force Friday. I haven't played Destiny since the new stuff came out because I haven't got my boxes yet, and I don't feel like building a deck until the new stuff comes. But I played...
Insert the Price is Right sad trombone right there. Needs to be in there.
All right. We gotta make that a thing.
Played Clash of the Lightsabers.
The f*** is that?
Watch the video.
Yeah, it's exciting. I like that game.
It's the greatest
and there's a video
miniature board game ever created.
I guess, yeah, it's a miniatures game, isn't it?
Technically.
Is that the board game that I played over at your place that one time?
Did you? I don't know. Watch the video. I don't remember.
Which you can see on YouTube.
That's a lot of work.
It's short-ish. Depends on. It's short for a board game video. I don't remember what we played. That was a long time ago when I lived in that weird house.
I'd ask what's weird about that house, but I fear that would maybe take the whole episode.
It giggled when you opened the front door.
Oh. That's disconcerting. Now, I'm not sure if both of y'all are cutting out or if it's me.
I've just got nothing more to say.
Oh, well, all right then.
Leo. I mean, I've probably played Imperial Assault and stuff.
We did play this game at your place. I remember this game.
It's a good game with a hilariously low production value.
What have I been playing? Played Star Wars Destiny. I tried to make a Veers and Sienna vehicle deck work, but just wasn't in the cards. I was repeatedly... yeah, pun intended.
No dice.
No, I was repeatedly stomped by Cad Bane decks over and over and over. I had Veers, Sienna, and a TIE pilot, and one of those 3 characters was always dead before the first round ended. But I didn't expect to do well. I just really wanted to play some vehicles, so I had fun. Still got all my Empire at War release promos. That's the important thing.
Oh yeah, I did play Destiny since Force Friday. I played at the launch thing and got those promos, but I wasn't playing with any new cards. I played against some new cards, but I really needed to start writing down everything I played between episodes.
Yeah, that would, be a good thing to do, but we won't.
Then he could just read off a list. Well, I played Destiny, and I played X-Wing, and I played Imperial Assault, and Clash of the Lightsabers. Thank you. Please clap.
That is all.
What else? I guess I've still been playing some Galaxy Heroes. I don't know. Kind of starting to get. I think I'm getting close to being done with that game now. Still trying to hang on till Thrawn comes around so I can get him unlocked, but I find myself just logging in each day to quick do a couple of the quests, not even all of them, and then that's it. Like, they released these new things called territory battles for guilds to do that were supposed to be really cool, I guess, from what I heard from people, and they ended up being like really lame. Like, there's really didn't seem to be anything interesting about them. Maybe there's something cool you do on the last day, like if it's a big raid or something like that. But I don't know. I gave up before we got that far in it. So there. That's what I've been playing.
And actually, you reminded me that I've also started playing Galaxy of Heroes per the request of a couple of my officers in the National Guard. So I haven't gotten very far in it at all, but
could they order you to play?
I'm not sure that would fall under the category of a lawful order. I would be able to respectfully decline to obey that order, although I certainly, would say, yes, sir, we should set aside time to do this with the whole platoon because it's a good team building exercise, literally.
Play Galaxy of Heroes or drop and give me 20.
I don't see anything wrong with that. That would not be abusive of any authority at all. Not one bit.
We're clear on that.
Yes,
oh,
absolutely.
That's where my Phasma book was.
Hey, that's where your Phasma book was.
Maybe I should read that.
Yeah.
In your pants?
No, in my basement.
Womp womp.
Oh, how'd it get down there?
Because I put it there?
Interesting. Well, case closed. We solved this. Another one on the books, boys. No pun intended.
Haha. I see what you did. Okay. The only other thing that I've got to play was some Magic the Gathering. And, it's a tabletop game. It's a collectible card game. It's kind of like Destiny. But
we still got to try that Star Wars The Gathering module I found for Tabletop Simulator.
Yes. No one should be booing Magic.
Boo.
No. So many people play Magic, you can just, walk into anyone's front door and be like, yo, who plays Magic? And they'd be like, I play Magic. And you can just play.
You could do that with a lot of things. Like, hey.
You're like, hey, you want to see my white weenie? And then you whip out your deck.
Oh, I get it. That's very clever. You don't want to jund them right in the face instead?
Nope.
All right. Well, I guess that's it. So that's what we've been playing.
See you next time, folks.
Goodbye. Thanks for your money. No, I'm just kidding. Let's get on to our topic of the day, of the week, of this time that we're doing it.
The episode.
The episode. What are we talking about this time?
Being a GameMaster.
Oh, yeah. We're going to
Galaxy. Isn't that what they called it in the WotC one?
The what?
I feel like one of the previous versions of the Star Wars RPG called it the Galaxy Master. Maybe I'm wrong.
In West End, but certainly not.
No,
WotC.
I'm pretty sure in West End, the GameMaster too. It's been a long time since I read through those books, but I'm pretty sure I remember that from a kid. from being a kid and playing that.
From a kid.
Game
Yeah,
Master.
this one kid told me.
Some kids are like, "Hey man, it's a Game Master."
Maybe I'm an idiot. That's probably more realistic.
Game Master is a new drug the kids are doing these days. So we're going to talk about what it means, what it is to be a game master. And of course we mean in the RPG, tabletop RPG sense, not some mod who goes around on MMOs and like fixes things. So let's discuss really quick, because this is an obligatory thing. Whenever you're going to discuss or give your opinions on how to run a tabletop RPG, you have to give your resume. And I think should we do this in longest resume or shortest resume first?
Wait, you have to give your resume?
Yeah, and it has to be in the right format, and you have to have, your references.
I didn't even type up a cover letter.
Well, I mean, you should have that just standing by. And if
Gotta
you
get
don't,
my RPGing resume updated.
yes.
Do they have like an RPG version of LinkedIn?
LinkedIn? Oh, you know what? We should start that. Oh, what would that even be called? Yeah, yes.
Rolled in?
Thank you, Seth Monster. Exactly. Thank you. They already got it. Oh, yeah. In case we didn't mention it in the past, maybe it was mentioned last episode, but
Sure
Patreon,
was.
Was it? Sweet. What am I talking about?
Our devoted and esteemed patrons now have the privilege of listening to us live, unedited, unscripted.
Yeah, this is our second time.
Uncensored.
Yeah.
Slightly more sober this time.
There's, people just listening to what I'm saying, and they've got to listen to it because they're listening, and Evans, he'll edit it out later for you, but people who really want to sit through have no choice but to listen to exactly what I'm saying without editing.
Lucky you. You have to. You have to listen to them. And then you'll listen to, then you'll download the episode, and you'll be able to compare them. And you'll be able to tell us how much
you can
better this is.
review the editing.
That's right. And you can say, don't bother editing. It's so much funnier when you don't. The dead space is just...
I really like, the time you guys spend thinking and going,
And then when everyone just sort of cut out all of a sudden, and then Leo fell asleep, that was great. All right. So, yes, our resumes.
I've only been caught.
we really sold that up.
Once.
We really sold that feature of being a patron.
I did not say it's the only time I've fallen asleep. It's the only time I've been caught.
I mean, you also play Overwatch while we're recording sometimes, which... That's fine.
I think I've only done that twice.
Oh, okay. That's fair.
And not for the entire episode. Just the beginning.
Uh-huh. All right. Fair enough. Okay, let's get on to...
I think
Where were we?
in more, I feel like
my
I should...
goodness.
No, I was going to say, the people listening live can post in the text chat, so we do actually get a little bit of live feedback, which I think is one of the actual better benefits of this live experience. Okay. Had to tuck it up a little bit. Didn't want to scare people away.
Good job. We're going to move you to the sales department, which is in the basement. Okay, so do we want to start with... Well, let's start with Joe, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, you've been GMing tabletop games the least amount of time.
You cut out for like the time amount you said, but I'm assuming you said not a lot.
Yes, that is correct. Not a lot.
Yeah, I hadn't played any sort of RPG before college. Then I think we got in like 2 sessions of D&D before that group fell apart. And then I think we got in like 2 sessions of the D20 Star Wars role-playing game before that just didn't happen. And then Edge of the Empire came out, and I played a decent amount with Leo as the GM. I think we had 2 different campaigns, or like 1.5 or something. And then I decided to try my hand at GMing, which lasted about 2 sessions before schedules made that stop happening. So I have GM'd a total of like 2 sessions of Edge of the Empire, which I think went well, but it just didn't go anywhere from there.
No,
That's
RPG players and scheduling conflicts.
No, that never happened.
Also, I played on the podcast here when we've done that.
Reminds me, I saw like a thing posted on Facebook today that was like, it was a GM sitting at, and he's all like, okay, the group has finally scheduled the time for us to all sit around and discuss when we would like to play Dungeons and Dragons. And
Well, I think I'm next. I think I was going to be second, whichever direction we went with this. So, I have been interested in tabletop RPGs since about forever, but I only really started playing, very strangely, in 2010. And it was thanks to the Army that I had a group to play with. And, of course, 2010 was the year that they stopped making Saga Edition of Star Wars. But all the books were out, and that was the latest and greatest thing. That was what my GM had.
well, it was the latest.
No, yes. I mean, you can argue certainly that revised D20 was better because you could die at the drop of a hat, but I think Saga had a lot going for it. Certainly not the book design itself. With their...
What the fuck was up with that?
I don't
Seriously,
know.
whose idea was it to make the goofy ass size for those books? It's like if you haven't
to the coast.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen them before, like their size is approximately like if you take a comic book and turn it on its side, that's how those books, that's the size of those books.
Yeah, they're like, you forget like the old like Calvin and Hobbes trade paper, like the paperbacks where they're like wider than they are tall.
That's a good comparison. Yeah, they were weird, but so that's what I actually learned to play tabletop RPGs on, Saga Edition Star Wars and Mutants and Masterminds 2nd Edition, which was another D20 OGL 3rd Edition game with superheroes. And let's see here. Fast forward 2 years later, and I hadn't gotten to play much more. And I was like, you know what? I'm sick and tired of this. So I just took it upon myself to buy some books and start running D&D. And then, that same year actually was when they dropped the beta book for Edge of the Empire at Gen Con. And I got one. And I started running online games. Because that was back when...
You got 2.
I did get 2. That's right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And 2 things of X-Wing also.
Uh-huh. It was a good trip to Gen Con for me. I didn't go.
You got your money's worth, and other people missed out because I bought one of each extra. Suck it. So then we had the beta book, and that was a really interesting time. I was running some online games over Skype with people from the Mos Eisley Radio community back when we still had those forums and that site and that show, and that was good times.
Back when there was hope for the Old Republic.
Hey, it's good now.
Yeah.
It's better now than it was then.
It's definitely better.
Yeah. It's good. You can't say it's not good. But
yeah, but like when it released and like I started playing it, I felt like Obi-Wan in episode 3, you know, when he's yelling at Anakin and he's like, "You were the chosen one."
I thought you were going to say when they were arguing in the elevator. All right. So, yeah. I've mostly just been playing D&D because, again, that's a game that everyone knows how to play. And I've mostly just been a player most recently on our recorded Star Wars sessions. So I guess that's that. So now The big one. The one we've all been waiting for.
You know, I've actually been doing Star Wars role-playing games on and off for about 20-ish years now.
Jeez.
Because my first experience with Star Wars role-playing games was cruising the internet at my dad's work and finding people's like homebrew rules for the West End D6 game on like some like GeoCities and Angel Fire websites, and printing those off and getting in trouble from my dad for wasting all the company's ink and paper because I was like printing off like entire reams of these random ass rules I was finding on the internet. And I really had no clue what any of it meant because I didn't have any of the actual books. So, and I mean, I kind of, sort of had an inkling of how D&D worked a little bit from playing games like Baldur's Gate and whatever, but I'd never actually played D&D myself. So I kind of like me and a couple of my other friends kind of took like that little bit of knowledge plus this little bit of homebrew we found and just sort of made up our own stuff to fill in the gaps. And it was like we were just doing goofy shit. Like we would constantly be rolling checks for things that didn't need checks. You know, it'd be like, okay, well, you arrive on the bridge of your ship. What do? Well, I'm going to sit in the pilot seat. Okay, roll the dice. Oh, all right. Well, roll a 2d6 sitting down in your chair check. Oh, well, you rolled a 1. Well, it wouldn't be a 1 if you rolled 2 dice unless you were really good and got one of them to stand on its corner or something. But yeah, you'd be like, oh, you rolled a 2. Well, man, you sat on a vibro knife. Take 4 damage. There was a vibro knife just sitting on your chair. And that's kind of how this is how 6th grade me started playing Star Wars role-playing games.
Wow. So did you ever play an actual game of West End Star Wars?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, from these internet resources, we then discovered that this was an actual thing. We tracked down the books, and so we had a few of them. Like we had, we had the source book, we had the Imperial Handbook. I know we had the Dark Empire source book, Death Star Technical Manual, Kraken's Field Guide. I think those were some of the main books that we had. Might have had a few others here and there. Then once we had that, we were able to actually start playing some real games. But even still, we're still pretty young then, so all of our games were ridiculous, because there was only 3 of us playing. Okay, so there was one guy. Maybe sometimes there would maybe be like 4 of us. But mostly there was a group of just 3 of us who played together. So it would just be one guy running it and 2 players. And so, you just have the 2-player characters, but yeah, we'd go and do, like, take over an entire Star Destroyer. Star Destroyer was named the Inflammable, by the way.
That sounds like when you first hear it, it sounds like a reasonable name for a Star Wars Star Destroyer.
Yeah, because they're all like the Invincible, the Inexorable.
Right. You're like, wait, that's
they have the Inflammable.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I just kept picking it up whenever a new edition would come out. I kept playing. Like when I played as a kid there, we kind of ended up rotating duties of who was running things. But then when I got older, when I went off to college and the D20 system started coming out, I ended up basically becoming a full-time GM then, because nobody else knew Star Wars quite as well as me in my gaming group. I mean, they were all nerds and they all knew Star Wars, but they didn't have like the encyclopedic knowledge that I had. So
because they hadn't read that book that we talked about.
Yeah, they didn't read the Ultimate Guide to the Star Wars Universe every couple days as a child. So that's really when I started like GMing for real, was in college there. And it made me a little sad though, because I've actually only played Star Wars role-playing games as a player about 4 times since, I mean, not counting like my goofy ass D6 adventures as a kid, but as like an actual real role-playing, I've almost never been a player. It's almost been exclusively GMing for me.
All right. So, let's see here. Let's start with this question. And it's kind of a big question because there's a lot of angles to come at this question from. But if you're familiar with playing a tabletop RPG, it doesn't have to be a Star Wars one, but if you're a player, you know how it works to do a perception check, you know how it works to punch a monster in the face. How do you go from that to becoming a GM, DM, keeper, whatever it is, for the particular game that you're playing? I certainly have my thoughts, but I'll let you guys fire the first volley.
Well, I think one of the important things is always going to be, look back on your experience as a player and try and remember what things the GM would do that you liked. What did they do that made the game fun? And, try and emulate that. And at the same time, think about, if you've had experience with a bad GM or DM, which almost everybody's had that at least once. Also, think of that. What did they do? And then tell yourself, don't be that asshole. And our patron chat suggests that the first step should be buying the core rulebook, which, I guess that's that's important.
That would be my pick, because that's like how for the Star Wars ones, the beginner games I think are good too. Because when I ran Edge of the Empire for that brief amount of time, we started with the beginner game, and then we moved on and like created characters and did that. So the beginner games are helpful. The GameMaster kit for Edge of the Empire was kind of helpful too, because it has like a pre-made adventure. So
that little mini adventure that came with the GM screen and stuff, I actually like that a lot better than the adventure that came in the beginner's game.
Yeah, I do too. I think those two things are really helpful to kind of holding your hand through the first session or two.
And really, just in general, I think when you're getting started out, I mean, even just not having the beginner's game, but any pre-made adventure can be a good help for you to kind of go through a few times until you get the hang of playing the game. If you have been a player for a long time, though, you might be able to jump into just writing your own adventures already. You might have enough experience with the system, but if you're still, just in general newer, the pre-made adventures are usually pretty good. If nothing else, read through one to help give you an idea of how to write your own adventure, even if you don't use the pre-made.
And they're great for just straight up stealing from. Like, oh, I really like this part, but I'm going to modify it for the story that I've written.
Oh, yeah. Taking, you don't necessarily need to take the entire thing, but, just grabbing encounters out of those pre-made adventures and slotting.
Nope. You just dropped out. Dropped out with slotting. Which
Okay.
are monsters from D&D, the Slotty. Let's see if Leo comes back to finish the fight. Okay, Leo is still here. He's amongst the living. Hooray! Play the song Still Alive. Uh-oh, he dropped out? Coming back. Okay. Well, while we wait for Leo, he brought up a very good point before he disappeared about pre-made adventures versus building your own campaign. And that's kind of a big debate amongst all RPG people, not just Star Wars people. Are pre-made adventures too railroady? Do they offer any wiggle room and creativity versus running your own campaign where you have total control over what happens. But for my money, I don't think it's as big of a deal here, because you look at D&D, and that's a system that's designed for you to make whole new worlds, whole new universes, and people that enjoy watching like the show Critical Role, they play in a custom-made world on that show. So then people may think to themselves, I have to create this big, elaborate, very original, but still steeped in classic things world. And with Star Wars, you're just like, no, it's Star Wars. Everyone knows how these things work. We know the stories, we know the tropes, we know what we're supposed to see in Star Wars. So do you think there's a right or wrong way to do this, or step by step on how you lead up to creating your own narrative, Joe?
I feel like you should start with a pre-made one, even if it's just a beginner game, because that will definitely give you kind of an idea of, what you maybe want to try and mimic. I've been working on a campaign, custom one, and I think another really easy thing you could do, which is what I've done, is look at some other stories you like from maybe video games or TV shows, and then just kind of repurpose them into the Star Wars world for your players.
So what I had tried to do with creating some custom adventures was basically stealing every episode of Firefly and tweaking it for Edge of the Empire, because it just works really, really well.
Sure.
And that's something that...
I'm not going to say which... Sorry, I was getting those messages.
Yeah, no worries. We're in contact with Leo, everyone, if you're wondering what's going on here while we're talking.
I'm not going to say exactly where I cannibalize these stories from, in case that ruins anything in the future for anybody, but I do think it helps a lot when you already have, because I don't know, I'm not a writer, but I'm like, I remember that playing that in this game and thinking that was kind of cool. So how would I change that to fit Edge of the Empire or something? And I don't know, I'm kind of looking forward to eventually trying it out, because this is my first time ever, making a custom adventure. Obviously, I don't have a lot of experience even with pre-made adventures, but...
No, but yeah, just straight up stealing from movies and TV shows, that's a long-held tradition in tabletop RPGs.
I feel like it's really impressive if you just make it up from scratch, because that's a lot of kind of story and characters and things you just have to have in your head from the get-go.
Yeah, and that's something that I've done for D&D, and that's something that I actually struggle with Star Wars, because I want to still be faithful to canon, so I don't want to get stuff wrong.
Right, and that was actually an issue as I was just kind of sketching out this campaign I'm working on. I had a thing where I was planning on sending the players to Mandalore, but the setting was post Return of the Jedi, and in canon we don't really have any idea what Mandalore is like at that time, and I had my own idea for it that I figured would work well enough, but then the Season 4 trailer for Rebels came out, and I see we're going to Mandalore in there, and that was that has a lot of implications and could completely ruin my version of Mandalore, so I'm just going to stay away from Mandalore altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Oh, a wild Leo appeared.
I'm back in front of a live studio audience.
Just like Cheers. Okay, so, I don't know if you heard, Leo, we were talking about the pluses and minuses of both pre-made adventures and building your own campaign. If you had any thoughts before we move on from that.
I don't know, because I don't know what you said. So.
Oh, you couldn't hear me?
No.
Well, no, I mean just your own unfiltered, unbiased, thoughts that not at all influenced by anything that we've said. What do you think of pre-made adventures? I guess you already gave your thoughts on stealing things from them and using them to add to your own, but I mean, you certainly think that they are worthwhile, although you probably wouldn't necessarily spend the whole $30-$40 on an adventure book.
Yeah, I mean, I don't generally use them myself, but I think they can be a good tool, definitely. And as long as you don't slavishly stick to what's there in the book, like I feel like you should use whatever's in the adventure book as a base for your adventure. You gotta be, if you're gonna be, I mean, half the fun of playing the role-playing games is the interactions between the players and the GM. And if your GM is just sort of doing nothing but reading from a book to you, I mean, I don't know, I guess at that point you could just be reading the novels or something like that,
Yeah, it's true.
So just don't rely on them too much is I guess my feelings towards them.
Okay. As I just mentioned, there's adventure books that you can buy. You've both already mentioned the GM kit is a great place to start because it has a pre-made adventure. There's also one in the back of each of the core rule books. But if you're if you have a core rule book because you're a player, well, hey, there's an adventure in the back, and then you get the kit, which has a screen, and hey, you have another adventure. So between those two, you're in a pretty good spot already. So, I mean, that's the logical thing, is I'm going to be a GM, I'm going to buy the GM kit, done. Anything else as far as purchasing?
Well, if you didn't buy the beginner game, you need to buy the dice. I'm under the assumption we're talking about the current Fantasy Flight role-playing game. So,
yes, although I think we could broaden the question out to anything, because, I mean, even with D&D, it's like, well, I've got the Player's Handbook, the DMG, and the Monster Manual. Oh, and I bought the screen, so, okay, what happens after that?
well, you need dice, and if we're talking about the Fantasy Flight one, if you haven't played this before, you can't just use your regular old set of dice. And buying an extra set isn't a bad idea if you expect your players to be sharing all of your stuff and they're not going to come with their own dice.
Well, if a players are going to come with their own dice, they can go home. That's the rules.
Well, and that's, home specific rules are another thing that we can touch on, although I don't know that I would enforce that one.
Yeah, okay, if they're a new guy and you're teaching them the game or whatever, that's different.
Well, we're assuming this is all for new people for the most part, right?
But if you're an established group, and well, you could be in an established group, but you could be, say, taking over as GM for the first time.
I suppose.
But I'm just saying, if someone's not going to bring their own dice, you at least have to put that much effort into it.
And the character sheet.
It's a little different with the, I think, with the Fantasy Flight system.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, I'm as far as dice and books, but especially any older system, like when we played the old Star Wars games, when we played, especially like D&D and stuff. D&D was the biggest one, where every player, you bring your own dice, you bring your own player's handbook, have those two. You were if you already had a character rolled up, then the GM would maybe let you play long enough just to have you unceremoniously killed, and then you were sent packing. But I don't think that I think everyone should have their own dice for this system. I don't necessarily think everyone should be expected to buy like the core rule book. Mm-hmm. Just because the Fantasy Flight system, I feel like you don't need to be referring back to the books nearly as often as you do with many other systems.
The only things I own for any of this is Edge of the Empire beginner game, Edge of the Empire core rulebook, the GM kit, and the Bounty Hunter source book. Oh, and I actually have all but one of the adversary packs, which I think are really cool, but maybe we can talk about that later, or not, if maybe that fits here.
Yeah, go for it.
I bought the first 3 back when I started GMing, and then I noticed they came up with some more, which I bought a couple weeks ago. And I think they're really cool. It's just a deck of cards, and each card just has an NPC on it, and it says like they're, how tough they are, like minion, rival, or nemesis. And it has all their stats. It has some flavor text. It has their abilities on it, all on like a little card. And none of these things are like unique to these cards. You could find them in the source books. But since I only own the core book and one source book, if I want to use an Acklay or something, I wouldn't be able to find that. Even if I had all the books, then I'd have to be sorting through all the books instead of flipping through this little deck, and I can, leave these NPC cards in front of me during encounters so I can easily reference who's in the fight or in the encounter or whatever. I think they're handy, and they have cool artwork. I don't know. I like them, even if I haven't used them too much since I haven't been GMing.
A book I like, even if you aren't playing the D20 system, even if you're playing the Fantasy Flight system, is back when West End Games was publishing the D20 system, they took an approach with their core book that's similar to Fantasy Flight's in that they had everything for the player and the game master all in one book. So you didn't have to buy like with D&D, how you have like the Dungeon Master's guide, and then you also have the player's handbook, 2 separate books. Here, everything's all in one. But they did eventually publish a Game Master's Guide book. You know what I mean? And a bunch of it's like NPCs and and stats for them and whatnot. And if you're not playing that system, those chapters aren't going to be that useful to you. But there is a bunch of chapters that do talk about crafting adventures, crafting campaigns, and specifically putting a Star Wars flair on them. And I thought they were pretty neat books. A pretty neat book.
And it may have already been brought up, and I'm sure it's been brought up many other places and by us also. Joe, you keep mentioning the beginner games, and I have one of those also. I have the Age of Rebellion one, and I was actually really happy to get that, if for no other reason than it has another full set of dice. So I bought the dice pack when that first came out, and then I also got a beginner game which had more dice. So just between those two things, and also the pre-made adventures and maps and easy to figure out character sheets for brand new people, I've actually gotten a lot of mileage out of that one box for multiple groups. And it's worth the money, because the dice pack is what, $15 just by itself? I think something like that. $15.
It's like 10 or 15.
I think it's about $12.
Okay, and then the beginner game is 30. I think
30 sounds right.
Okay, so you're getting an adventure, which you can download a sequel to for free on the website, and that's for each one of those, including the Force Awakens one, I believe, and then a dice pack and a very easy to learn step by step for the game, because the adventures in there they take you through how to use skills, how to fight, how to do all that without it just being
it's like when you start a new video game and it's like, oh, there's a low hanging thing, now we get to teach you how to crouch. Like, it introduces you to little encounters in ways that'll slowly ease you into the mechanics of the game.
So yeah, those beginner games have a lot going for them. So if there's one thing that you're going to buy besides a core rulebook and a screen, I guess I'd say that might be a big one on my list.
I will say that the campaign in the campaign in the beginner game is a lot better, or at least for Edge of the Empire, is a lot better than the one in the back of the book. I did not like the adventure in the back of the book at all.
I don't think I looked at that one.
I thought it was a pretty terrible adventure myself.
You know what? I wish that they would republish Crates of Crates in the beta book for Edge of the Empire. I love that one. It's so good. It's probably not even like that great by today's standards, but it's a stupid fun, smuggler adventure. You need to get these crates of crate dragon eggs off Tatooine. Oh, some guys are after you. Hop in the speeder and take off, and it's fun. It's a fun one, as Edge of the Empire should be. All right, so now another big question that I tend to hang over my players, not 100% seriously, but there's a little resentment here, and that's how much more work does a GM need to put in versus just being a player?
Oh God,
that says it. That says it all.
I mean, it's so much more work. Being a player, all you have to do is you just show up. I mean, you just have to, not be a dick and actually show up when you say you're going to show up to play. And then, yeah, you
have to build a character.
Yeah, well, you know what? I mean, anybody can build a character. There's almost no effort involved in that. I mean, okay, if you're going to be in one of those groups that role play is really hard, okay, then yeah, players do have to put quite a bit of effort into their role playing and staying in character and yada yada. But even still, a player still only has to manage that one character. The GM, you have to be the character of everybody else. And not only that, you have to be prepared and planned for each day. No player wants to just sit there twiddling their thumbs while you try and figure things out, or say constantly are flipping through books trying to check a rule or something like that. If you design an encounter with a monster that does some kind of weird thing, or a character who has a weapon that does something strange, make sure you know all those rules ahead of time before going in for the day. It's going to make the experience much smoother for you and the players. So there's things like that. And, I mean, you have to deal with all the bullshit from your players, too, which is an experience all on its own. Because the thing is the more perfectly you craft an encounter, the more your players will either just completely break it or just, ignore it. You'll have the best boss battle ever set up, and they'll instead decide to go to the fair and eat hot dogs the whole adventure for some reason, or whatever. And you just have to deal with that pain that no one will ever see your most perfect encounter.
So here's a question then. Since if we're going to be playing again, I want to make sure people don't miss out on these things. Do you just like, okay, go eat hot dogs? Wouldn't you try and be like, oh, the guy at the hot dog stand doesn't like selling to your kind and won't sell you hot dogs. You better go back that way.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I'm saying is you need to, that's what I mean, that's what I'm saying with you need to put up with the from the players is you kind of, you need to be able to deal with those kinds of things and find a way to redirect your players' energy to where you want them to go. Some days it works, and some days it doesn't, and you just have to, let your players do their thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you design an entire campaign around them for this hut, and I had this campaign. That was the whole thing. That was all laid out. They were going to be working for this hut and all this other stuff because they had this debt that they needed to work off and blah blah blah. Like that was their obligation that the party had was this debt to this hut lord, and he was kind of calling it in, and they didn't have the money, so he's going to make them work for him. And well, lo and behold, then their second after their very first mission with him, so it's only the second time they've met with him, one of our players decides that he figures that the hut is going to f them over and never let them out of the debt.
I feel like I was there for that.
Yeah, and he just up and out of the blue jabs a bunch of syringes full of poison into the hut's eyeball. And there you go. That's how it goes some days when you're a GM. And
exactly how the hut felt.
Then at the end of that session, you have to go home and scribble out all the shit you had planned for the campaign and redo it all.
Yeah, and with that, it's mainly it's not about your players ruined things or you didn't find the right method to get them back on track, and that back on track is itself a big contentious phrase with this, but not being married so strongly to particular elements of your story is a must, is an absolute must. Don't be married to that supreme villain that, oh crap, he was supposed to last 5 adventures and they got really good rolls and killed him immediately.
Well, I give another question. Why can't you be like, how can you let him die? Can't you just be like, oh, you shot his arm off and he snuck away?
It all depends. I mean, sometimes you fudge the rolls. Sometimes your player rolls 5 20s in a row, which happened once, and slaughters the boss. And
that's another.
When a player rolls 5 20s in a row, they expect something to happen,
right?
And so, as the GM, you just say, fine, all right, and then you just roll with the punches. And I mean, at the end of the day, your job as GM, I mean, you're not just there as a storyteller. You're there to facilitate your players having fun. And that's another thing, is you kind of have to also be able to gauge what's fun for the group you're playing with. I mean, if you may really want them to, do whatever, they have to, deliver these crates through to the secret asteroid base. But, if they decide that it's more fun to go to the fair and buy hot dogs or whatever, like I said before, I mean, whatever. I guess if that's really how they want to spend their gaming session, then there you go.
Yeah, and that's another big one, is that oh man, I got thrown off my thought track. Seth, thanks, in chat, said players have to feel they're contributing to the story, or that's when they go buy hot dogs. No worries. I was gonna say that. I'll think of it in a second. I was totally gonna follow up on what Leo is saying, and it's just gone. It's just gone. Okay, well, you know what? If I think of it, we'll think of it.
I have another question. I think, if I recall, technically, in the Fantasy Flight system, the GM's dice rolls should be done in view of the players. But there's also times where I feel like you'd want to, lie about what happened, which you couldn't do in that case. I think when we played Leo, you did not roll public, right?
I didn't usually. I mean, that's also just because I'm so used to rolling behind a screen, because as a GM, there's times you need to. In one campaign, one of my players made a droid character And so he was small, so he got, like dodge bonuses for being a small size character and whatnot. And then he took he had a bunch of other talents and stuff like that just upped his dodge. So this was he was the guy who, whenever we would play role-playing games, would be the one who would go out on the forums for said game and find the most broken character he could, the most broken min-maxed character, and then that would be the one he would go roll, and it just always pissed me off as a GM.
Like, why would?
And he found like the most broken gun in the game, like. So yeah, and he also had like protocol droid arms like welded on the side of his body, so he could hold a gun, which made him the ugliest looking droid ever. But yeah, and it was this ridiculous gun that had like some crazy area effect shot, and he was just like totally overpowered compared to the rest of the group, and like all my NPCs could never hit him. And all this other, so I just remembered what his stats were, and then would always just, fudge my rolls when I was rolling.
Uh-oh. Have we lost a Leo yet again?
That's another thing I like about the Fantasy Flight system is what are they called? The fate tokens or something?
Yep.
So if something like that happens, you can just flip over one of your tokens and be like, you know what? No, this happens.
That's true. I haven't really taken advantage of those.
I feel like there's a lot of things in there, and I don't understand why someone would want to try and find a broken character in an RPG, because at least to my understanding, I want to be playing an RPG to have a fun story experience, not necessarily a super mechanic-y game experience. And as a GM, like if like you're saying earlier, or Leo was saying, you don't want to come up to like a creature and then have to go dig around in a book. Well, if like something like that happened, I imagine I would just make stuff up, because in the end, making stuff up and keeping it going to me sounds a lot better than following the rules 100%, because the rules don't sound like they're that important in this case. As long as it all kind of works still.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as long as it's not something that's like, I just crafted a Death Star, and it's like, no, that's not a thing.
Right. Oh, I'm thinking, these guys showed up, and then you're fighting, and then the battle's just taking too long. So I'd be like, oh, you know what? They died. Just the next time they make an attack, just be like, yeah, they're dead. Even though it's technically not how it should go.
Mm-hmm. Well, as we're talking about how much work us poor GMs have to put into all this to craft a good story and a well-balanced mechanical side. And I know you haven't done a whole lot, Joe, but there will always be times where you have to ad-lib and make things up on the fly. So have you yet reached the point where or you have an idea at least, of how much prep work you need to do versus how much you're going to get screwed with, or your best laid plans are just going to go out the window?
Well, like I said, I've been crafting a campaign, and I feel like I've got an outline of what the first session should do, and which characters are in which scenes, and things like that. And I guess I haven't, compared it to some sort of veteran's notes, so I don't know if it's a lot or hilariously little, but I feel like it'll be enough for me to push people along and know where I hope they're going. Because if they don't get to where I need them to go, then the campaign is over, which...
Yeah, and that's kind of, I've always said there's the understood pact between players and GMs that, like, look, we're playing an adventure game. So let's agree that yes, we're gonna go on an adventure. We're not gonna go just by hot dogs.
Hot dogs.
And yeah, like I said, I've got the character names and I know what the settings are like, and I imagine that it wouldn't be very difficult for me to ad lib a lot of that sort of stuff. And I do also have a spreadsheet full of names because I think that would be the biggest sticking point for me. If they're like, "Oh, hey, I see that guy in the corner," and go talk to him and ask him what's his name, and then I'd have to go, it's Frank, which is not a very Star Warsy thing. So I do have a big list of Star Wars names by species and then just some generic ones to have handy. So hopefully, if that situation happens, it doesn't like slow the pace of the game when I can't think of a name.
When one that reminds me of another piece of advice is when naming your characters, being some of your NPCs, don't give them like too outlandish of names usually, because if you're going to want your players to refer to them, if there's something really weird, they're going to forget it, and they're just going to call him the guy with two heads, anyways. Whatever.
Call him
I should
Barry
introduce a
Blue
Troig.
Yeah, I actually had a Troig lawyer in one of my campaigns.
But they were both working for different firms. Well, a lot of the kind of the NPCs that I think maybe won't, maybe be recurring characters are just, I thought it would be fun to take some of the original characters from Imperial Assault and sprinkle them in. Because one, that's already like a visual. Two, I like those characters and want to actually give them a story. And three, they already have solid names, and it's a lot easier for me to imagine what their personality is like.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was like perfect. Oh, I'll just take these characters that are only in Imperial Assault and bring them into our campaign.
I gotta say, Joe, it sounds like you're kind of doing about the perfect amount of prep work. Kind of, at least for me, the way I would do it is I'll generally have, a broad outline of the campaign, and usually like I'll, maybe try and split things up into a few different, like 3 or 4 different story arcs within the larger campaign. And then from there, it kind of, like the night before each playing session, I would do a little bit more detailed play or prep work, and that would usually be based on where we left off from the last time we played and what I was expecting to happen. A lot of this stuff you can't prepare too far ahead of time. Sometimes it would be like if I had specific information like on, like in a document that the players were going to be able to see, or a message from somebody or something like that, those kind of things would be written out. So I would have exactly what I wanted to say to make sure I didn't miss any of the information when I was imparting it to the players. But, beyond that, any dialogue and interaction with the players, that stuff's all going to be ad-libbed.
Yeah, I have the first session outlined, and then hopefully the second session sort like Leslie outlined, and then I'm decided I'm not gonna, and I have like the titles for a couple other potential sessions, and I'm not gonna like flesh anything out anymore until that we get to that point.
I've found that I have so many best laid plans just get destroyed, and I've been guilty of doing that too, just wrecking my GM's day. That ad lib has kind of become my main go-to. Like, I'll have an idea. It's like, I want them to go to, if this was D&D, I want them to go to Ravenloft, and I want it to be funny when they, how they get there. I want it to be a little creepy, but it's going to be very Castlevania like. But then that's kind of it. I pick out a few monsters that I really want to show up, and think of some characters that need to be there. But aside from that, it's just like give them, be the guy with the question mark over his head, and then let him just go and roll with it. Because my usual group, they have found some very interesting ways to screw with me that are actually quite wonderful. Looking back, I'm just like, that's the best thing that could have happened.
Well, and I
don't
think
expect
it
that.
also really depends on your group too. How much prep you're going to need to do or be able to do.
Yeah.
Oh, and you just jogged my memory of what I was gonna say earlier. When you're getting to know your group, even if it's friends that you've known for years, they might play the game drastically differently than how you expect them to. So you might be planning to run, Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings movies, and instead they wind up trying to play Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And you just got to know what they want and then adjust fire.
So, do you, when having your custom campaign, have an end goal in mind, like a grand finale? Because that's sort of sitting there in mind. And I just got done watching season 1 of Harmon Quest, which I thought was hilarious. If you don't know what that is, it's Dan Harmon, one of the creators of Rick and Morty, sits down and
Community.
They play. I think they play Pathfinder, but they don't say it by name. But the books are on the table, and they just play through that and have a different guest each week. And then there's like cartoon animation showing their characters doing stuff, which is what makes it great. But that one, right off the bat, first mission, they have they have to stop this cult from opening the demon seal or something or whatever. And so that's like, their goal throughout the whole thing. And that's how mine is set up, where right off the bat, somebody tells you this is exactly what you're going to be working towards, and this is your mission. This is probably going to take you a long time to do it, and, whatever you way is whatever, but that's the overarching goal, is that, because to me that felt like it would keep players, even if they're doing other random stuff, at least, they have a goal in mind, and if that goal is compelling enough, hopefully they would stay on track more or less.
It depends. Honestly, I've done it both ways. Sometimes I will have, in my mind, I've always there's some kind of end goal. I've an end to my campaign, and then just whatever happens in the middle. I mean, you can't really plan that out too much, like I said, because players are,
yes, they
are chaos incarnate. But sometimes I will explicitly give that goal to the players. It might be, such and such Grand Moff is a total dickhead. We are gonna send you guys off to infiltrate, the Empire and assassinate them. Whatever. Begin adventure. Other times, I'll slowly introduce more and more of the overarching story as we go along. Like I did this one where at the beginning of the campaign, this is actually the one that I had the Troy lawyer in. The beginning of the campaign, one of the characters' uncle or grandfather or something like that dies and leaves his starship to him as an inheritance. And so then the players are like, oh, great, we got a starship. And then, along with it, yes, it's haunted by the grandfather who just like always pops in on him. Is like, ooh. No. So they have to complete this cargo run that he was in the middle of when he died, though, too. That's like part of the conditions or whatever. So they go off and they do that, and then that kind of is the start of their adventure, and then they get some more work from that. But as time goes on, they are getting attacked by like these random people, and eventually you find out that there was this like Sith artifact that was hidden on the ship, and like that's why they're getting attacked, is because this has been on there, and then that leads them further on, and blah blah blah. So I don't know. It partly depends on the story you're trying to craft each time.
So we spent a lot of time talking about crafting the story and sort of getting the players on the same page, or getting on their page, really. And, everything we've talked about is world building. Is there anything else that GMs need to be aware of or do either before, during, and after the game session? I know from my experience, I'm very often also the host. So that's a whole nother
Yeah, I
set
was
of
going to say,
responsibilities.
if you're also hosting, which the GM often is, you're in charge of snacks. Okay, this is a very important aspect of role-playing games.
Now you know if you have good players if they offer to order the pizza and pay for it, because, you've been so gracious as to put this game together and do the hosting and, let them drink all your drinks. They should at least buy you pizza.
Yeah, you're also, besides being the storyteller, GM's also a referee. And like I think I mentioned earlier, part of your job is to facilitate the players having fun. And sometimes, although you all may be friends, some people might play the game, and sometimes you're not friends necessarily. You might be getting together a group of players that you just met at your gaming store, or on some gaming group online or whatever. But at any rate, you want everyone to be having fun. Sometimes maybe a player is going to be getting in the way of that. Part of your job is going to be as like a referee or a moderator to make sure everyone's having fun. And that's probably one of the tougher jobs when it does come up. Frankly, luckily, I'm almost playing with friends, and we have usually always play together really well. So I personally haven't had to deal with that situation too often. I've been on the other end as a player and been stuck with other jerkface players in my party. So I've seen it from the other end, but
Wow, I can't tell if we lost him or not, or if he was
I'm
just
here.
no, that was it. I was just done.
okay.
So I know
It was very sudden.
I said, but then I didn't actually have anything to continue with after that.
Excellent.
So
Okay. Joe, did you have anything on this one? Any
Nope.
other thoughts? Okay. Well, we've kind of talked about the before and the during. So what about afterwards? And really, how do you determine that, like, this was a really good session because maybe everything fired according to plan, or maybe everything just burned to the ground, but maybe it was still good. So how do you gauge your success on that?
If people are excited for next time, I guess.
yeah, I think, like I said, if people are having fun, that's the biggest thing. I guess I'm sure there are some role-playing groups out there that for them it's serious business and not necessarily just fun, I guess.
Yeah.
And so they may have different measures of success. And again, that's going to just be knowing the group you're playing with. But I would say for the most part, for most people, it's going to be, did all the players have fun?
Mm-hmm.
If the players aren't having fun, you need to change something up,
Yeah. And for me, there's a couple ways that I approach this, because did everyone have fun? Like, it's almost always going to be yes. I've only had really one time where it was not as fun as it should have been. But, I get really analytical about how players liked different parts of things, and if they liked this really left field thing that I might want to bring back. And I've had actual after action reports with some players, especially my army people, because they really want to get together. They haven't done it many times, and they want to talk all about the things that happened and how cool this part and that part was. But then I've also had times where I've wanted to wait a day or two, because if you ask someone immediately after it's done, they'll be like, yeah, it's great, and then that's all you'll get. But if you give them a day or two to think about things and reflect, and then you say, so what'd you think of this part and this part, and then give you much more detailed thoughts on, what they liked and didn't like about it. But I think fun, like you said, number one thing.
At the end of the campaign, give all your players a campaign review sheet to fill out and hand back to you. Like at the end of the semester in college when you get the
survey
sheet that they hand
yes.
out and you got to rate your teacher and stuff.
I see nothing wrong with that, honestly. I would want to know, like, do you feel like I was railroading you? Did you have enough freedom of choice? Were the encounters too easy, too hard? I know you're mostly joking, but I don't have any problem with that at all. I'd like to know. Maybe you wouldn't. Maybe you'd just be like, screw you, players. You're coming to my table.
What? You give me an F? another review sheet in the trash. That guy was a player anyways. I give him.
I know who's getting killed off next session.
Oh, man. Each time
All right, and you step off your spaceship and roll a agility check. Oh, what's that? No, you got shot through the head by a sniper. Oh, everybody get down.
Dear. Just out of the clear blue, roll me an agility check. Oh, you failed? Oh, sorry. Yeah, it was 4
Brick
of those
falls
red dice.
from the building, hits you in the head, and you lose 2 levels.
A piano.
Yeah, put level loss in there. That's what this game needs. That's what Star Wars is missing. And the very last thing, since it's Star Wars, that we're sort of putting all this under, even though I've taken it out to D&D stuff a bit, because that's what most of my DM time has been. But when it comes to Star Wars, and I think we mentioned this while Leo was out of the room, but I always try to be as accurate to canon or legends as possible. I'm very uncomfortable taking it outside of there and trying to do that. But is that necessary? Do you have to know everything about Star Wars?
I feel the same. I feel the same way. I don't know if you have to get it right, but I do. You have to get it so it at least seems right, because people know what Star Wars feels like. I feel like I would be... Like, I wouldn't want to be sitting there and know more Star Wars than the GM. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I worry about.
So,
and
I don't know.
It would be weird to me if someone was like, okay, we're going to Bespin and it's
An ice
like on fire. Yeah, I'll be like, or, if they just got some kind of like sort of important Star Wars fact wrong, I'd be like, am I supposed to correct him and ruin his story or just live with it?
You correct him. It's your job as the player to with the GM.
I guess you could just correct him by like in universe, be like, how in the heck is there a Wampa running around on Tatooine? Like, I refuse to even pull out my gun because I think I'm hallucinating.
So
Sand Wampa.
So if you're gonna GM, say you have your plans for the session ready to go. Your general outline. Players are gonna go to Bespin. They're gonna hang out on Cloud City or whatever. That's at least do a little. If you don't have an encyclopedic knowledge, at least do a little bit of prep research. Just read the Wikipedia entry on Bespin and Cloud City or whatever real quick. That's all you really need. And at the end of the day, Star Wars encompasses an entire galaxy. If, you maybe get things a little bit off from how they are in canon or whatever, maybe you could just say, well, whatever, this is, it's a big galaxy. This other thing is out there too.
Exactly. All right. Well, I think we covered a lot of ground here. Like a lot of ground. Are there any other final thoughts that we want to tack on the end of this, or do you think we're good until our patrons and everybody else are like, you didn't talk about blah, blah, blah?
You're right. We did not talk about blah, blah, blah.
We're the worst. I'll have to get that next
That was
time.
always my favorite race to play.
Wasn't that the chicken
no.
lady? No, okay.
Let's. I think we should hurry up and end this before I cut out and lose my connection again.
That's a great idea. Great idea. Joe, do you want to do this? Oh, I wasn't going to ask you to do things again, but if you want to, go for it. Because I know Leo doesn't want to.
Patreon is the place where you can show us your support, and your support means everything to us.
Your love.
And your affection. That's the same thing. You should check it out, or just tell a friend that we're okay-ish, or give us a review on iTunes. You could listen to us on iTunes or Google Play Music
that
or
should
Stitcher.
be a new shirt I make. Jodo Cast. We're okay-ish.
That'll be a top seller. Maybe that's what we'll start sending to patrons.
You can reach out and talk to us on Twitter at the JodoCast. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitch sometimes. There's quite a bit on our YouTube channel these days. We have a subreddit, r/the JodoCast, which is kind of a ghost town. And the hip-hop and hubbub of JodoCastiness these days is on our Discord server. You can find an invite link and links to all of the aforementioned places at jodocast.com. We also have an email.
Yes, we do. show@jodocast.com. Full of everyone's favorite spam. All right. Well, I think that's probably going to do it, unless, you want to tell us about the weather in Fargo or out there in Arizona. I guess not. There is no weather in Moorhead or Arizona.
It's 87 degrees.
Ugh, that sounds awful. Like right now it's 87 degrees?
Yeah.
We had a big storm yesterday.
Like, I go outside in the morning.
60-mile-an-hour winds.
Jeez. Oh, jeez.
It was like in the high 90s today.
Ugh.
Like in the morning, I go outside and I'm like, oh, it's really nice. And then I look at my phone, it's like 80. I'm like, okay, I've changed.
Oh man,
Oh,
it's
changed,
it's so nice. We're getting to like the most perfect time of year right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you go outside and it's like
65.
today the low was 54 and the high was 62.
Oh my gosh, that sounds wonderful. I want to
That
live
is
That's like,
there. The happiest
best
place
thing
on
ever.
earth.
yes.
well, that's like our, at least last year for my 1 year of experience that's like November through March is like in the 30s through the 70s every day.
What? Oh, wow.
For like lows and highs. It's like just a brutal summer and then like a really long, nice fall.
That doesn't sound too bad, actually. I might go for that. All
But
right,
you
well,
still
now
don't get
that...
any,
What?
I said, but you still don't get any snow.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the best part.
You shut your mouth.
No.
Finally drops an F-bomb this episode, and it's for snow.
Well, I've been just trying to be courteous to your editing
Thanks.
needs.
Unlike some people.
I'm always courteous to your editing.
I want to encourage my editing.
I've been trying to get through a whole year of my life without like coming in physical contact with snow. That's just kind of a life goal, and I haven't been able to do it yet.
Oh boy. Okay.
And I won't this time because I'm going to be back in Fargo again in December.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Well, now that we've caught up on everyone's weather situation, I hope you all enjoyed this episode. Let us know your questions, comments on this one. And if you got some, we'll address them in the next episode. Because I love this topic, and we'll be sure to reply to anything that you have on us. All right. With that, have a good night. I'm glad to be back. Thank you to Leo and Joe for holding things together. Nothing burned down in my absence, so that's awesome. And there's our outro music. It's wonderful. Love it. It's the best. It's so great.